Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to start? Yes. Okay, let me say something before the speakers come here. First thing is that considering that this is a siesta time, I will pay attention to the Spaniards to see if they are still paying attention to everything. Also, let me say that there is a group of people arranging a soccer match for tomorrow, so you will have more news about that, because soccer is important, especially for Germans who are winning everything. And going to the panel, I have been told that my duty is to preserve INMA's atmosphere. That means that we are having now a conversation. We will interact. There are 6 people, very famous people, by the way, that will say something very briefly, maximum of 5 minutes, but they can even speak less than that. The important thing is to keep in mind the title of this conversation. The title, as you know, is New Approaches and Understandings to Media Management Research. So we are speaking about that, not about any other thing. Okay? I'm trying to protect the issue of this panel. So what you are supposed to do is not to ask questions to the panelists, but to tell us your doubts, your suggestions, your views, your perspectives, and let's see if everything comes together to a nice conversation. Okay? So I will ask the panelists to speak. If you speak more than 5 minutes, I will come here and with all my power, I will tell you to stop. Okay? So, new approaches and understandings to media management research. First one, George Sylvie, Texas University.
Thank you very much. I've never been at a session where I'm actually just supposed to start the conversation instead of present a presentation, but I will say that I am, as a trained journalist and a journalism educator now for going on 20 some odd years, the more I learn about media management, the less I know, it appears, from the standpoint of exactly trying to tell people who are not in this room basically what it is that I do. And why am I in the journalism department or journalism school in the first place? Why aren't I in the business school? And then hearing the same thing from people in the business school. And one of the things that I feel personally that I am trying to get to know a little bit better after all these years of thinking that I knew everything there was to know about the way journalists and their editors think is, for lack of a better word, how do people behave actually when they're not doing their job? In other words, what is the context of this thing that we do, and how do we manage that given all the new environmental factors that we've talked about today, the changing nature of the economy, changing nature of technology, this idea of gourmet versus buffet versus chef versus cook. And what I find myself becoming more and more engaged in as a researcher along those lines is really asking people to share with me what they're thinking when they're doing. I don't say, well, what were you thinking? It's a little bit more subtle than that. But I'm in a stage now where I'm presenting my subjects, if we call them that, but actually they're my colleagues in the management profession, how it is exactly that they manage. And my whole life has been dedicated to answering that question. And I'm learning more and more that it's not a combination of how so much, it's a combination of who and when and where. Because I don't really think many times that managers exactly can explain to you what it is that they do or why, except they just do. And part of this investigation at Texas, what we're looking at, we started 3 or 4 years ago and we continued last year in the United States and now in Sweden, is asking people exactly that. When you are posed with a situation, what goes through your mind? And then what kinds of actions do you think it would be if you decided to act? What would be the end result? And what would influence those things? It's a very large fishing expedition, if you will, but also I find it fascinating because people don't exactly think the way you think they do. And I'll in my 5 minutes, I'm sure I'm approaching that. Feels like 10, but the sense of managing being really a sense of coordination, a sense of motivation, a sense of psychological deviousness or psychological one-upmanship with reporters on the part of editors. I think that is going by the wayside, and I find in our preliminary results at least a sense of wonderment, a sense of people trying to come to grips with the very same things we're talking about in this room. What is it that people want? What is news? And that's, to me, is fascinating because with the new generation of students that I have in my classes, journalism students, I find that they're not really very much accepting of the old who, what, when, where, why anymore. They want to know why not more often than not, or they have different ideas of what constitutes news, and I find they're more aligned with what people, real people themselves are thinking, not necessarily real people who read the New York Times, but real people who read the local paper or who watch the local television station. So I'm rambling here, but anyway, that's what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Second speaker is Pedro García Alonso from Universidad Complutense de Madrid, one of the oldest and the biggest in the country. He's not one of the oldest, but the university. Okay.
Thank you very much. I just don't take answers, I take more questions. The idea is, first, very simple, is that information is free nowadays. So most of the consumers don't want to pay for something they can obtain free. That's the first problem. The second is, well, really, it's simply said, a pass from paid news to free news. The second is that information is growing a lot without limit in time that every day everybody gives to communication and in all the systems that we have to communicate, to receive communication. So there's so much, there's not time enough to attend it. And it's a problem for media. Why? Because media, I think that last 3 centuries has not changed the system of viability of obtaining their money, which is asking money from the consumer and asking money for publicity. If the consumer don't want to pay for it and publicity is going down, so we have a problem. Publicity cannot grow enough to support so much information that we have nowadays. And the other idea is that now we are in the age of the communication. So economy depends completely on communication. What you don't know, you cannot buy it. So your power is your audience, and your power is who knows you. So you need communication, but communication do not sustain. So we have a problem for mass media. We have to change or to find a new way, a new model for mass media to sustain them. So that's the question. How can media support this problem of not obtaining money? So I've been looking for new systems to sustain new media, old media, mass media. First, pay-per-view, obviously, no? But you have to make a very quality product to obtain consumers who want to pay for it. Second, try to find a public that want to pay for your news, what means segmentation. Third, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, anyway. Fourth, solutions like Oh My News of Korea, no? Co-creation, or passing a strategy with any startup or any media, any synergy with e-commerce. You have an audience, you create a community, and you obtain money from them. And there are three questions that I think that media management has to answer today. First, what does your audience want from you? Second, what will they pay for you? And third, what sort of business will you be running in 5 years' time? This is impossible to answer in 5 years' time, but at least next time. So that's the problem. Another solution is to get your public inside your product. For example, adding to your news the comments that the readers make for them. And change your policy from push to pull to the audience, your customer strategy. And changing, like in the long tail, from something to everyone, a very generic product for everybody, just trying to grow and grow the size of your audience, passing to everything to selected people, just what they need to the one who want to hear it. And then pass from operational efficiency to flexibility, because the change is so big that nobody knows how it's going to develop. So you need any strategy to support you and to make you obtain an answer for the changes that the new economy and the new system of communication has. So that's my idea, no? How can we sustain the media in the new economy? That's all.
People are frightened when they see me. Anyway, third speaker, Elena Vartanova from Moscow State University. I think that's still the dean of the school,
yes,
which is in front of the Kremlin, a big palace. She's happy to receive you there, in her palace. Anyway, Elena, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Some people say we are in front of Kremlin, some people say we are opposite to Kremlin, but we are close to Kremlin. And that may be the starting point for my brief introduction, because I was really surprised to listen to our colleague from Portugal, who spoke like he was coming from Russia or from some Eastern European environment or from some Asian environment when he spoke about Marxist ideas, instrumental roles, about transitional period, etc., etc. So 2 points I would like to say. The world is not American, and the world is not Western European or European Union. Therefore, the first hashtag would be BRICS countries, as an example of a different world with different principles. The second keyword would be institutional economics. And this is extremely important for understanding media management, like management and also media industry functioning in a certain places. I took the case of Russia not because it is exclusive, but because it is very typical. And in Russia we have to accept the principles of institutional economics which Douglas North awarded as a Nobel Prize, awarded with the Nobel Prize, promoted, saying that if you introduce market economy, it doesn't mean you introduce the whole instrumentarium of this market economy, and rules, traditions, and informal agreements would not change overnight. And that means that this consistency with the past, about which we've heard before from our Portuguese colleague, is extremely important. Another word would be here is that the state is not only a regulator, as you are saying here. In some certain national environments, it used to be a proprietor, a powerful proprietor in media industries, and because of this institutional approach, we have to accept it cannot give up one day being privatized. Also, we have to accept that in terms of institutionalism, state might be functioning as a distributor of goods, as a distributor of investment, and that brings a completely different role of media management in being successful with business models. Also, we would like to say that different national environments bring to the Western world some lessons, and these lessons might be very successful when you speak about newspaper economy or economy of public service broadcasting. And I would say that on the one hand, the brilliant world in front of us is extremely important, and this is a digital media world. But this world should also accept that people have not changed that much as telecoms, as media companies, that habits of consumers, which is also part of the institutional economy, are there. And with the consumers, and that consumers sometimes prefer passive media more than active media, prefer entertainment more than consumption of public goods, and that in that very strong complex environment, we have to accept the traditions. That's all.
Even before I arrived, fourth speaker, Robert Picard from Oxford University, with the flavor of the Middle Ages, but with the ability to look into the future. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I come from an institute that is in one of Oxford's new buildings. It's about 250 years old. It's one of the strange things of looking forward. Now, what I want to do is turn our attention a little to the issues of what we do as media management researchers and what we're thinking about, and maybe where we should be turning our efforts. If we look at what we do in recent years, it's mainly qualitative research. We are not doing the kind of large-scale quantitative studies that address across cases and countries and other such things in a way that is done in other kinds of management studies. And I think it's a huge important to us. Because what we end up getting very often are case studies without capturing learning over time. And we can't take them on to other situations. And so our focus should not be on individual cases and what this company did or what that company did, but on the issues that are illustrated by those individual cases so that we can begin aggregating in a much better way. Because without doing that, we can't begin to put forward best practices for people that are actually having to make the decisions on a day-to-day. Secondly, we really are very weak on what would be critical business studies kind of approaches. Really looking at what's happening in management and companies and in a very, very critical way. And in the end, we get very highly positivistic kind of research as a result of that, and doesn't have a lot of critical behind it, thought behind it. I would also say that we all love, in media management, all of the popular business buzzwords, cliches, and concepts that come along. And we see them over and over in our research, and we have to really critically analyze those buzzwords and really actually get to the meat of them. And sometimes we're as bad as managers, so we just string them together and throw them in there, but without really critically putting together. So what does this mean to where we need to go and what we need to be doing? Well, we need to be looking at processes in a whole different way. We need to be looking at why businesses organize the processes the way they do and what the effects of organizing those in those ways are. We need a lot more consumer and audience-focused research, but really not just saying, here's what they're doing, but understanding how do companies and how do consumers work together to co-create a much better kind of service to each other along the way. I think also we need less technology-oriented research. It's not about, as I said earlier, it's not about the technology, but in management, it's about how we use that technology as a market maker and as a functional tool for management. And we really need to spend a lot more time looking at it in those kind of levels if we're going to provide management advice ultimately to those who have to work along the way. A couple other places that we really need to focus on, I think, in the future, we really need to look at leadership and really look at the leadership of companies. Because so much of companies' directions, strategies, and other things are directed by the leadership along the way. We don't really know today, not only in media management, but in other fields, what does leadership actually do? What makes it go right and wrong? I mean, just basic functional questions about leadership. How do you identify whether somebody's going to be a good leader or not? There's something that boards of directors are struggling with every day. We haven't begun to scratch how we can answer those kind of questions in a very effective way. And it's really critical for governance decisions of companies. Ultimately, one of the questions is, because of the nature of media industries, how do we motivate, harness, and support creativity? We're beginning to scratch those kind of surfaces along the way. And those are the kind of things that, as we look forward and we move forward, and we need to be thinking about those, because those are the real kind of underlying questions to what everything we do with the structures of the organizations and how we are trying to change, because we're trying to improve those kind of activities. I'll stop with that.
Fifth panelist, Dominique Bourgeois, from the University of Fribourg, originally from France. Dominique.
Thank you. Robert, thank you for these practical issues. I will change totally, and I will propose not practical issues. So that, because when you asked me to speak about management, I had many, many ideas. I'm working on concentration. I have links with many newspaper managers and so on. But finally, I decided to give you perhaps two stories, which which was given by Michel Serres, which is a French philosopher. I think some of you probably know Michel Serres. And they are not at all practical in management, but perhaps we can have some lessons. You can look at YouTube if you want to have these short stories. And he said that he was a sailor, and one day he was invited by the École Navale in France, which is the main high school of the Marine Army in France. And when he entered in the school, he looked and he see a painting, and he was surprised because these paintings was totally not at all good. The stars were not in the good positions, and you know, for a sailor, an old sailor, it is very important to know where are the stars, so to know where to go on the sea. And then the second story, Michel Serres, one day later, he went and in the North Europe, I don't know, remember if it was in Iceland or something like that, in the North Europe, and he met a sailor, another sailor, and the sailor does not use at all maps. And Michel Serres, which is a sailor, uses usually maps. And he said, how to know where to go on the sea without any sea maps? And the sailor explains the sea as Michel Serres does not know at all the sea. He explains how to go to find the fish, how the sea is moving, how to find everything on the sea. That's the conclusion of Michel Serres, is that there are 3 generations. The first generations who search and use information by know the reality of the sea. The second generation, and Michel Serres is the second generation, who does not know exactly the sea, but who knows the maps. And the third generation, the admiral of the High School of Marine in France, who does not know the sea exactly, who does not know really the maps, but who knows the network with geolocalization and so on. So, what for management, what can we think? First, there are changes, of course. There are changes to find information, to use information. We are faced with many changes for media and more generally for information companies. That's really clear. But also, there are what we call in French cohabitation with various generations, and perhaps we can add over various people. I think, for example, of people who knows some part of the sea, and not the North Sea, but other parts of the sea, and so on. So there are a variety, a diversity of people, and so for the companies, they have to face the changes and simultaneously to face also the variety of people, of the demands of the people, and so it's not so easy to find a good way to adjust the users, the changes, and also the generations. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Claudia Lubecke from the University of Cologne, Germany, the country which controls everything now, from finance to soccer in Europe. Okay, so.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for having arrived late. Now, I'm stuck between the conference chair and the rector in this room. I was asked to talk about new approaches to media management research, so I better stick to the topic, I guess. 3 very quick points. First of all, I guess we all agree it depends on what we mean by media management. Because once we agree on the topic, we can probably more easily agree on approaches or new approaches. I think in this room, as in any other room, we have lots of understandings of what we mean by media and media management, and hence we should not be too sad not to agree on new approaches. Second, so question is, of course, the topic combined with a method, combined possibly with a cultural background or country. Second, new to whom? New to myself? New to your narrowest colleagues? New to your school? New to your whichever audience? Politicians, policymakers, companies? Probably not all going to reinvent the wheel, but maybe we have some new ideas or new approaches that we can pursue, and I come to that in a second. Third, or kind of along those lines, I think it's still very crucial that we know where we come from. I come from a business school, others come from economics, others come from journalism schools, others come from film or whatever other creativity-driven orientations, and I think that makes a huge difference. And there, the beauty of being the last, I dare to disagree with Robert Picard, who says we don't have enough quantitative studies. I guess that depends on where you go. If you go to economics, if you go to management, we have plenty. If you go to journalism and social science studies, I agree, we still have very few. Long story short, what are the new approaches? Well, blind as I am, I don't see any. But I don't think that's bad. I think we have two kind of side answers to this. One is, I guess we are all also bound to university institutions. I guess most of us. Apologize if there are journalists in the rooms, but those who work in academic institutions, I guess we have to follow their rules. There's enough of deans and post-deans and ex-deans in the rooms. They will not let you do whatever you want, most likely. And so in that sense, I think we follow very much the approaches that are common to our institutions, and that's not bad. Secondly, I think, having carefully listened to John Lavin over lunch, let's benefit from the other kinds of doing or ways of doing media management that is not our home turf. So there are approaches there are lots of approaches in this room which are very new to me and not new to others, and hopefully all of us can offer some kind of newness to somebody else. I don't think we should be so ambitious to reinvent the wheel when it comes to approaches for research. Research to me is science, it's academic work, and these approaches are pretty much there. Topics are different, technologies change, cultures change, but I guess approaches I give up, and hence I only use part of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. So now, everybody can speak. Let me tell you a couple of things. First of all, if you want to, I will suggest you to say your name and affiliation, first of all. Second, please speak short things, bullets, more than conferences, so the role model is not Fidel Castro with an 8-hour speech or whatever. Then you can speak from your seat, or if your voice is not strong enough, you can come here. There's not extra charge for using the microphone. So up to you, okay? I will try to moderate, but let's have an inspiring and dynamic conversation, okay? You can say whatever you want, provided it's related to the issue we are speaking here, which is new approaches and perspectives on media management research. You can start with the previous suggestions and ideas from the panelists, or you can do whatever you want. We are in a free country, and so on. So, Greg, your name and...
I'm Greg Lowe from the University of Tampere in Finland. I see some characteristic problems, in my view at least, of where we are in our field and our research in that field. One of them is we tend to have, I think, a bit of a high rail bias. We tend to say we're studying about media management, but we study about particular areas of management. We care about what CEOs do. We care about what editors do in newsrooms. But are we studying about what financial controllers do? Are we studying about what HR managers do? I mean, there's a lot of areas of management, and we tend to be, I think, a bit too narrow. I think a second problem is that very often we have difficulties in that we study more about what managers need to manage than about how they actually manage. You know, we study about the things that managers are responsible for, perhaps more than how they actually go about doing the management work that they're hired to be responsible for. I think a third area that's kind of important is that we need to understand that very often we cannot do it's not just anybody who can do every kind of research and management. Very often you have to have the trust of the people who are managing in order to do this. And that requires, there are certain threats to research as soon as we get into that kind of a situation, because there are political things we have to manage in terms of agreements and how we can say things, because it has an effect on our career, it has an effect on their work. Also, we know that when people report when we interview or talk with managers, it's often in retrospect. They don't really usually talk very much about their failures, although those failures may be far more interesting and important than their successes. And what they usually do report is a reconstruction of the past, not necessarily what really happened, but how they frame this so that it has, a kind of positive spin that makes them look all-wise and all-knowing. So there's a lot of threats I see and kind of challenges in developing our approaches to understanding of what areas of management we study, how we go about studying those areas of management, and how we can in a sense develop our methods so that we're able to do good research without compromising ourselves.
Thank you, Greg. Mercedes.
Well, thank you. Wait a moment, because this is too short. My name is Mercedes. I'm coming from the University of Navarra. And I was thinking, where we were talking about, I've been teaching a new subject for my students that it was called Media and Entrepreneurship. And I asked them to propose a business to develop. And I put the condition at the beginning of the subject that it has to be related to media. So a new business in media. And at the end of the subject, at the end of the semester, I realized that it was very difficult to demand that. Because, first of all, for them, for their minds, there were not new media to invent. They're not magazine, they're not journal, they're not a new TV channel. And on the other hand, for me, it was very difficult to say, no, that's not media. For example, some of the groups wanted to develop a travel agency online to put in contact people. And another group proposed to sell the paintings of one of the artists that was in the subject. So, I was just thinking about these new ideas, new perspectives, new research, but I'm very confused after being the whole day listening, and I don't really know what are the new media.
Okay. Not only sentence or suggestions, also doubts. Good. John, name and affiliation.
Let's get rid of the term new media. Let's get rid of it. New approaches, traditional media that have digital, but no one works for something that's just one, so let's forget it.
Okay, good. More questions. Claudia Cologne.
Well, I'm happy to drop the new media, but I think the previously raised issue is true. To what degree is media something that has to do with content, press, journalism, or to what degree is media, new, old, traditional, digital, something like games, music, travel agencies, online, etc. So I guess once we agree what we mean, and then we can also think about, back to the panel on research, how to research it.
Paul, how can I... Okay.
Okay, I'm Paul from University of Salzburg. I've got a new idea for a book, and I'd love to invite you here. If you don't steal that idea and put some patent on it, the new idea would be called establishing a new scholarly approach in media management, which I would call managerial media economics. So this is a sort of a hybrid, a bridge between management studies and economics, and applying that to the media industries on a market level, less on a meso level, if you like, in between micro and macro. So that could be perhaps a new approach that has a good sound on it, and quite biteish perhaps, but That'd be an interesting challenge to look into the market affairs of media managers and how they compete against on a firm level, and how the markets themselves contextualize their behaviors and what strategies and leadership approaches they apply. Sort of like this could be quite a good idea.
Felix.
Yes, from Salamanca, Felix. I was looking at the labels of the internet. University of Salamanca, sí, Felix from Spain. I was looking at the name, the International Media Management Association. I was posing myself a question: why management? Don't we analyze businesses or we analyze enterprises? Can someone explain me why we talk about management when in fact we do analyze some management, but we do analyze something else? Maybe someone can explain me what happened 4 years ago and what were the motives, or maybe there is a situation today or a chance. The names are not important, of course, but they may be relevant.
You look like Oprah. I find a new job.
You are better. You are better.
Oprah and me. Okay.
So, I just had a couple of quick thoughts, partly as a consumer of media research in my previous life. One thing that certainly is true in the UK, can't speak for anyone else, on the quantitative side, I feel that there's far too little rigorous academic work. Far too much of the work is consultancy driven, private organisation-based work. And that raises a whole series of problems in terms of public policy about, its objectivity and who it's commissioned by and all of that. So I think there's a big gap, which I think Robert's already touched on, particularly on the quantitative side, in the research that needs to be met in a more rigorous, objective, open, the words, academic way. The other thought I had, and it's one I bang on in most areas, is really the need to look, if it's possible, to add some sort of longitudinal dimension to so much work, because without that it's so difficult to get ideas about any evidence on causation or any of these factors. So many cross-cutting studies, cross-sectional studies. What happens the year after? Very, very difficult.
I'm sorry to grab the mic again. I just thought about something along those lines. I don't know if that's true, but maybe some colleagues can help me. I think we have observed in qualitative work and social science work a strong degree toward quantifying this qualitative work by the use of software that counts, I don't know, words, sentences, letters, commas, everything, combinations of words. So about 5 years ago I spent some time at the LSE, and there were lots of people running in different social science and anthropology, media, etc. departments who quantify formally qualitative work. I think and to me one reason for doing that is it's much easier publishable, which seems to be what drives people. It's harder, it's more objective, it's more rigorous, or it looks like being. And it looks like being. I'm not making the case, I'm not doing it myself, just in the discussion about new approaches to research in media. If media has a lot of text, or even we get this analyzing software for pictures and moving pictures and films. So maybe using such kind of analytical approach, software-based, would be a new approach, and maybe it would be worthwhile discussing if we like this or not. I'm not saying it's good, I'm just thinking we start quantifying a lot once it gets, there's, so.
George.
Yeah, just another comment. I actually happened to have co-authored a study that was published last year, I believe, in the International Journal of Media Management, looking at technology studies as done in the journalism journals and found out that there was no technology literature basically, and no management literature at all. And the conclusion basically is that we need to look at technology studies. There wasn't even diffusion literature in the technology studies to any large extent. And I just want to mention that points out to me that their disciplines are not speaking to each other or not reading the same journals. And I think that's part of the problem, especially in media management. But I'd also be curious to see if, as the person who reads the most articles, Božena would like to at least give us an opinion on what she sees and what she thinks. I can't bring this back there.
That's it. People at the end of the room can speak. You are human beings also. No, but I think it's better to come. Hello, Božena. Okay.
Thank you for calling me. Well, I can only say, well, not only what I read, but also what's being published. Let me start from the beginning, then I don't know. What I observe in many of the submissions and many things that come through my desk is a lot of people have very good stories to tell. Meaning there is a question. People try to answer the question, but very often they get lost in providing an evidence. It's either too much evidence, meaning too much statistics, too much data, of slicing the data in such a detailed manner that you lose the original what you were looking for, and all the other end starting with a huge studies want to answer the whole world in one 5,000-word paper. And that's one of your paper actually is one of a very unique one who tried to make a meta-analysis of all the papers that have been done before to sort of summarize or bring them in a aligned form. Do I see new approaches? There is a lot of research that come by that is very narrow, specific. Social media is right now the topic. I don't know how many submissions I have about social media on impact on whatever. Also, a lot of work on advertising and measuring the impact of advertising on this particular part of media or this particular. So I find a lot of either very specific or very, very, very broad approaches, and that's why I see there is a need for good storyteller of finding actually a good problem. One of the issues I see as well that is, sometimes I feel that people write paper just because they want to write paper, not because they see a problem or they see something they want to contribute to. And I would be happy to see a bit of a movement in first identifying the problem itself, then if I can do a little promotion, we have a new issue coming up this week, which actually have a very, very good 3 articles, actually the whole field about managing public media companies. One may say, oh, there's so much have been written about public broadcasting. Greg Love has brought a set of, we had a huge number of submissions that actually looked at the financial and managerial aspect of public broadcasting. And I can only encourage to look in a very specific, and as well when submitting somewhere, search whether there's a special issue or something. So next coming special issue will be in cross-platform management, something we were mentioning here earlier. Cross-media, etc. Cross-platform management seems to be a topic that have been addressed as the one upcoming one. So that's what I could see.
Great. Great. This is a good example of mix between information and advertising, not only in media, but well done, well done. You should take all the opportunities. Okay. Zvezdan.
Thank you. My name is Zvezdan Bukanovic. I've spoken already, so I will be very brief. In terms of a few issues here that we raised, the issue of new media and how many studies, in terms of qualitative and quantitative studies, have been published actually within the field of media management. First of all, I wish to say that I'm teaching a new media course actually dealing with the new media management and economics. So I don't really deal with the traditional legacy media. And what happens is that I was trying myself to find the as good actually definition of new media as possible, and it was very difficult. As many of you have mentioned, there are more than 100, possibly even more definitions that are very challenging. Sometimes they're even contradictory, very similar, and so on and so forth. But it seems to me that Lev Manovic's definition of new media was very interesting. I just want to share this information, although many of you know that information as well, that new media is determined by the fact that it's used on internet, it is software generated, and it can be followed by the screen. So it seems to me this is the issue, how we define new media. On the other hand, in terms of business studies and what our research and how actually our research is published, there are, first of all, very few journals that specifically deal with media management and media economics, and that causes a problem to our field. As we know, we have only a few really internationally established journals, and that is one issue that is important here. The second issue, I would very and highly support the idea of Professor Robert Picard, who mentioned that actually we have done very little quantitative research. I have done actually research on digital business models during the last 6 months, and it was difficult to find more than 50 highly competitive articles in this field. And that is really, that I think is a problem. And also most of the articles are conceptually written papers, which means they're qualitative in studies, and they do comparative analysis as well. They are not quantitative in studies. This is my, I mean, it's a personal opinion, of course, but this is what I would like to share with you. Thank you.
I wonder myself if we have a duty as a researchers of media management, and in my view, considering that in most part of our countries, companies are having bad times, feeling the pinch and so on, I think that we should perhaps pay more attention to how to help them, how to serve them. Because we are very good at describing what's going on, even analyzing the past and so on. We are very comfortable because we have all the data. All the data is there. What happened in this particular market with this offer or whatever. But I think that we should be bold enough to suggest solutions, new business models, new sources of revenues, new insights for media managers to describe, to learn how to improve the situation of their companies. I think that we should feel that there is something that useful that we can do. Just the suggestion is there. Sorry, Dominic.
Maybe. Well, I think while media companies don't value Cristóbal Benavides from the University of the Andes, Santiago de Chile. While media companies doesn't value what we are doing in our research in media management and media economics, maybe we can be the support for them. Maybe we should working more hand by hand with them, inviting the media managers some meetings over here to let them know what we're doing and we're in researching, and that's all.
I am Ricardo Leiva of Los Angeles University too. I disagree a little about what you have said about too much data. I think that in a lot of papers, in a lot of journals, you see a lack of data in a lot of senses. I think that we need to do more quantitative research. For instance, in the former discussion about quality in the media, if we are not able to define, and you have made this definition, what is quality, and agree what is quality, that is a core concept, and we recognize that we don't have a more or less common definition of quality in the media, I think that we are not doing our job. as researchers, as consultants in the company, to companies, if we don't agree or we are not able to try to find a more similar definition of this, I don't know how we are going to advance in this field. And you see in other fields as economics and management that probably they have a more similar, or they disagree. At least they know what are the most important definitions in the area. And sometimes I don't find this kind of agreement in our field. And if we don't advance in this, I think that we are going to have problems.
Well, just to clarify my point, I'm not against empirical research at all. I presented a paper this morning with many regressions and data and so on. The only thing that I try to point out is, let's not forget the concerns of the industry. Full stop. So they are having difficulties. We are supposed to be experts we know what's going on. We don't have the duty of the balance accounts of the survival of the companies in the short term. So we have perspective. We have the ability to see what's going on in different geographical markets. So let's try to discover their concerns and to find how to help them. Perhaps the way to help them is to have empirical evidences about what works. Okay, so that means 5. I didn't know that. I was trying to discover the sign. Stop. 5 minutes. Shut up. Go away. Red car. Okay, 5 minutes. Could you come or whatever?
I can stand. Actually, I want to get back to your topic about relevance to an industry, because that's something that bothers me too. We produce all the papers, and isn't any read by anybody that more than our friends, family, and colleagues? Is this read by any managers? And I have to say that yes, it is, and it's read by managers, and they say, first of all, you write too complicated. And the second thing is, yeah, but there is no conclusion. What does it mean for me today? And that's maybe something of what is the managerial conclusion of your study, of my study? Is this relevant? Is it already a history I'm writing about? It had a conclusion and it was being solved that way? Or in a theoretical manner, many papers in Journal Media Economics, can I apply this model? Can it be modeled to a future behavior or future situation with similar concerns? And I think it would be a great idea to invite more of the practitioners, because my feeling is they do read and they search for, maybe like they read Harvard Business Review and then they find inspiration. There could be other ways we as scholars should deliver them inspiration to what we study, and maybe they don't have the same depth in terms of seeing the problem. So that was my second for your idea of being more close with an industry.
My only problem with that view, Boson, is that Harvard Business Review is not written by professors. It's actually written by writers who go interview professors.
I think what Bozina is raising is the problem of incentives here. See, ultimately, we as academics, those of us who are academics, are writing for other academics because that gets us tenure, promotion, whatever it is. Let's be realistic here. So we're not writing for the practitioners. We like the practitioners to take serious what we write. But those articles that get published in academic journals are valued, probably will always be as complicated as they can possibly do, so we impress our colleagues. That's all right. Now, but there's a solution to that, and that is to have a second version of the article that is, for lack of a better word, dumbed down, so that a normal person not in the field can actually understand what you're talking about. Sometimes that is actually embarrassing because there's nothing there, but on the whole, kind of, I think that might be an approach. And so a journal might actually consider to have two versions, one kind of the simple one and the other one the academic one. And that kind of might serve both constituencies. That was my one point. My second point was going to follow Claudia and say, for example, I didn't hear anybody saying there's the finance methodologies, there's kind of options, and there's capital assets pricing, and there's portfolios and stuff like that. Why don't we apply this to the media field or marketing, consumer lifetime value? Why don't we apply it here, or leadership type issues and organizational behavior stuff that you basically raised? So in some ways, I think one of the best things that we can do is kind of take the best from various disciplines, apply this to our own subject matter area. That by itself is going to get us a lot of mileage.
And one sentence. Just one sentence. I couldn't agree less, but then we should also be, I think, thinking about whether the one who does that, for the example of finance, whether this person will publish in a finance journal. Because if our topic, media, is so attractive as we think it is, and if I'm a good finance academic, researcher, scientist, I think part of the issue is that then we don't find this material in media management journals, which partially are not rated as highly or incentivized as much as other journals in some schools.
Okay,
so we are down to those incentives. Well, not so what. I'm just saying, well, then fine. If you're happy with a media management paper in finance or marketing or whatever journals, that's a different story. You just have to decide. Coming to the one more sentence, we just heard that the most consultants to American, U.S. American politicians are Nobel Prize winners. There's an extremely high ratio. There has been some study done by, I don't know, Wall Street Journal or something like that. And so I guess the idea is that it's rigorous research which has made them so famous and so well known that later on they also do work which would not be published anymore. So I would still try to make the point of, for us as academics, let's do some academic work and not too early start writing for a consulting audience, whether it's political consulting or company consulting. That does not mean we don't have ideas. Everybody in the room has idea how to found a company, how to do better consulting. We just don't write it up because that's not what we meet for here.
Disagree. Come on.
I just wanted to add a point, which is that there is a sort of another audience that you shouldn't underestimate, and that's the policy community. You know, particularly in media, and particularly now the way things are changing with the creative industries, there's a very large policy community out there who are economically and research literate in many cases within the governments and the regulators. So that's another way of trying to have influence, and it's another way of trying to get through objective and rigorous work. So much of it comes from consultancy, which is questionable in terms of its objectives, if you see what I mean.
The sign of Paulo now is very easy to understand, which is stop, please. So thank you, all of you, for this inspiring conversation that we may follow later on during the whole day. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.